in the international law space, women's voices are underrepresented. There are plenty of female lawyers doing international law, practicing, teaching, working at governments, NGOs, advocacy, but their voice, and if you look at panels, books, by and large, it really is, more men than women. It's very difficult for women to sort of break into something that's traditionally held by men. And that's where mentors are so important, where community and networking is so important.
It's important for younger women to be able to be mentored by, other women in the profession who've been through the same challenges. Many, who at a different time perhaps have experienced many of the same thoughts and internal debates about choices. And I certainly have appreciated having had the opportunity to engage with, be inspired by, and really develop relationships with mentors who were women and lawyers as well. And I think it's important for younger members of the profession to see what the future can hold for them, and that it's important to be able to identify as well with someone in the profession who understands a lot of what you yourself are going through.
I've actually never had anybody ask me specifically, would you be my mentor? But I would be quite open to being asked that question. I would say I would never have been brave enough to ask it of somebody, but it wouldn't offend me if someone asked me. I'm a judge on the International Court of Justice. I went to law school at the University of California, Berkeley, the law school Bolt Hall. And while I was there, I studied pretty much any course that had any relationship with international law, as well as a general legal education, of course. The transition from law school to the profession for me was, I think, quite a bit of a surprise. And I had gone to law school right out of college. So I was 24 and thrust into a situation with a lot of people who had been adults much longer than I had. And finding my way in that world I found challenging. I felt like it would be easy to make mistakes. In fact, I was pretty convinced that I would be the first associate in the history of the law firm to fail the bar, which I didn't do. But I was nervous, and it took me a little while to realize actually that I could hold my own quite well, that I wasn't a misfit who they had hired by mistake, but someone who actually deserved to be there and would really be able to contribute as fully as anybody else. But what I wasn't doing was public international law, and I asked a friend who worked at the State Department legal office whether there might be opportunities there for people at my level of experience who'd done a little bit of work after law school. And he said yes, so I applied for that position and was lucky to get selected for it. At the State Department, I think that one of the things I found most important was being able to work in a collaborative way with peers who I liked and who I felt were working towards the same goal that I had, which was trying to sort through difficult international law questions in a way that really made us feel like we were doing our absolute best work. So in many respects, you could think of it in a very informal sense as peer mentoring, although we certainly didn't describe ourselves in that way. I've come to realize since joining the court that it's actually important not to lose sight of the fact that there are not very many women in prominent and visible international law positions. There are quite a few women who are in international law. There are quite a few women who have made enormous contributions in international law, but those are not always as visible as they might be. But when one sits on a court, there's a physical visibility of the role that is different.
I am recently coming from a nonprofit human rights organization called Physicians for Human Rights, where I was the director of the anti-torture program, and the area that I worked in was national security and international human rights. I also am an adjunct professor at Georgetown University Law Center, where I teach a national security seminar called National Security and Race in Post-9/11 America. I started out, of course, in law school like everyone else. I wanted to do human rights and women's rights and tree rights and things. And like many people who come out of law school, I went right to Sherman and Sterling, one of the biggest international law firms in the world, and practiced international litigation and didn't do human rights until later. At Sherman and Sterling, I worked with 3 very memorable people who are my mentors to this day. And being in a big law firm, you need to have mentors because you can get lost. And it was a combination of me reaching out to them, but also them taking the time to reach out and mentor me. And I had this great partner who I worked on this amazing case with, and he, even though his partners wanted him to do media and do speaking events, because it was a very controversial case, it was getting a lot of coverage, he knew that it would be better for the case if I did it. So he pushed me to be on CNN and BBC and ABC and to speak about the case and to go do panels. And this case went before the Supreme Court, Rasul v. Bush, and really paved the way for my international law career. One of the things that strikes me when I look back on my career thus far is I have made a lot of transitions since I left the private law firm Sherman and Sterling and moved into academia and went on from there. What strikes me is the network of people who I reached out to and who reached out to me to help me to make those transitions. You know, when I was at Sherman and Sterling, I went through a period, like many people do at private law firms, of knowing that I wanted to move on to the next thing, but not entirely sure what that was. And I connected with a lot of different people to learn about what they were doing. And I relied on people senior to me to help me, really. And it was about asking for help. And that was sort of hard to do, but I did it. And then once I asked for help, then they were very, very willing to help me.
I'm the director of the International Humanitarian Law Dissemination Unit at National Headquarters of the American Red Cross. My first exposure to the profession was already while I was in law school. I worked as a summer law student at a large full-service law firm in Toronto, Canada. The career I've had so far, I've had a lot of different opportunities that have been pretty varied. You know, I worked at an opera company, I worked in our parliamentary system, the House of Commons as an intern, I worked at a court, I worked in a research institute, I worked at a law firm before pursuing a position with the ICC. And I think throughout those experiences, almost invariably, I've met one person in every one of those environments who's really been a mentor or a guide. And I've been really fortunate, I think, to have had contact with people who believed in working with young people, who believed in showing them opportunities, and that you could also, as you know, somebody in your 20s or then in your 30s, look to someone more senior and accomplished and who'd had a really varied and interesting career and think, you know, this is possible. This is an example of the kind of work I could do if I really pursue what interests me and what's a passion for me. I think that being mentored means that you have the opportunity to speak to someone who's more senior than you, who has more experience, who's had exposure already to different facets of the profession, and who can serve as a coach for you or a guide, who can answer questions, and that it's really kind of an ongoing relationship, that you feel there's a relationship of trust and openness and confidence and a collaboration, that you could go to this person with questions and not feel that any of them are silly, or not feel that you'll be taken, to be too junior or too naive because you asked a certain question. And so, I think for all young lawyers, if it's possible to have someone in that mentorship role, it can mean a lot to your own personal development.
I have to say that I've never been somebody who liked the word networking or who felt entirely comfortable doing it. It's certainly something I would freely advise others to do, but I think it's also something that can feel a bit awkward and uncomfortable. So I would say, with hindsight, I probably could have pushed myself to do more of it and tried to convince myself to be more comfortable with it, and I certainly encourage people to do more of it than I felt comfortable doing as I was developing in my own career.
You have to be able to see opportunities that are not always presenting themselves as like the best opportunity. You have to be able to see the little opportunities. You have to be able to jump on things that maybe other people are not interested in. I had the opportunity to go teach a college. I was already practicing lawyer, to go teach a college class, give a lecture to a college class. And I thought, well, they're not law students or they're not lawyers, whatever. But I jumped on that, and the next thing I knew, I was an adjunct professor because that person recommended me to teach a class at American University, a graduate level school. If I had not gotten over my initial hesitation to teach a bunch of college students, I never would have gotten into being a professor and being in academia. So what I always say is there are hidden opportunities, and you have to take those hidden opportunities. You just take something that doesn't look like an opportunity and turn it into an opportunity.
Sometimes these opportunities come to you also because you put yourself out there and you take chances and you try to make contacts with people. I think some of the best opportunities I've gotten in my life have been because I've heard of them almost by chance. And I know that's not the textbook answer about how you necessarily build a career or a path, but I think another lesson I would draw from that is that you just have to trust your gut sometimes, and if you do have the capacity for choice and you do have options available to you, I recognize that not all students do have the financial resources and other possibilities to just take a chance and go away, move away, try something different. That oftentimes these are the ways that the best opportunities can come to you.
I always find it rewarding when somebody who I've known as a junior attorney blossoms, and I think it's very exciting when somebody really hits her stride, hits his stride, and moves forward to success. And anytime I feel like I've been able to contribute to that, even in a small way, by giving a suggestion here or a recommendation there, it's very exciting to see the new generations coming into international law. They often have different ideas and approaches than I might have had at their stage in their career, and I enjoy talking to them about that. Certainly, the electronic age has very much changed the way they approach research, for example, and I find it extremely interesting to talk to them about that. So I always feel I get as much from the conversations with them as they get from me.
I myself benefit a great deal from talking to some of my younger colleagues and to hearing what their ideas and their perspectives, and it causes you, I think, as the mentor, to give yourself pause and think about their questions and how that has impacted, how those issues have impacted you and how they impact the next generation. And it's also I think a bit of an obligation for all of us who've managed to have had such great opportunities in international law, to give something back and also to make an investment in the next generation of lawyers, because we certainly all benefited, I think, from having opportunities to engage with mentors and having had good role models. And it's a fantastic opportunity for us to give back as well.
I have had the great fortune of having great mentors. But it takes work on both sides. You have to have a great mentor, but you have to be a great mentee. You have to be accommodating their schedule. You have to reach out to them for help, ask for help, keep in contact with them. It really is about building a community and a network that sort of keeps growing. So whether you're a mentor or a mentee, I think being a part of a mentoring program and helping others to raise their voice is a contribution. It not only helps you, but it contributes to the development of international law itself.